There we go. And we're live, I think. Let's see if everything catches up. There we go. Awesome. It's always great if something works. Okay, so in the chat we always ask you guys like, how is the audio? Is the audio okay? Because we are of course also filming videos and then we change the audio a little bit, but most of the times it will be fine. Okay, so today we have a very special episode, and I know that we often say we have a very special episode, but today it is a really special episode because today we're going to answer the most asked questions you guys ask me. And those questions are actually a mix of what I hear in the workshops and what you guys send in on social media. And most of all, it boils down to the same thing, I think. It's all workflow, it's all making stuff exciting, making stuff more interesting. So I think for today, it's best to just sit down, grab a bag of popcorn or whatever you like, and enjoy the show. Bolt your doors, lock your windows. Let's get ready to rumble. And let's start the trailer so you guys know what you're watching. Okay, there we go. Okay, Ineke and Fred, hi, how are you? I hope you guys are doing fine. So, today it's about the most asked questions. And I think one of the things that comes back most of the times is, how can I create something that's simple, but it's also interesting? So, of course, we have the business portrait, right? The headshots. And headshots are very important, but in my opinion, a headshot is something more than just a representation of somebody. So, I can take a model and just take a picture of her, but that's not really a headshot or a business portrait. And we actually made a joke over here, like, hey, we have family portraits, we have business portraits. Maybe we should start something like your social media, do you want to join me for a date kind of photo shoots, and then make the name a little bit shorter. Because in essence, that's what you do. For a portfolio shoot, you do something different from a business shot. And I think that's one of the things that answers the question best. Make sure that you know where you're shooting for. So in essence, when I get somebody over here and thinks, hey, I want to be the CEO of, for example, a big company, I will always, before the photo shoot, go online, find out what that company is, what is the message of that company. Is it a company that's selling something that is, for example, all into outdoor life, or is it a business like an accountancy? Because with an accountancy, maybe a suit is nice, but without the tie, to make it a little bit more open and more modern. But if it's an outdoor company, you don't want to shoot somebody in a nice business suit, right? You want to shoot somebody maybe in a parka or in snow landscapes, and that would be a great headshot for a company like that. But if you want to find a date, you don't really want to be photographed in a parka, right? Because they go like, hey, way too hot, or way too cold, or way too hot, way too wet, whatever, I'm not going to go there. So as a photographer, for us, it's very important to find not only the story in an image, but also to find the purpose of that image. Lighting-wise, most of the time it will be similar because we want to make a setup that works for everything. So let's say you are joined or you are asked for a company to shoot their headshots for the whole company. That means, for example, 60 people you have to shoot. Now, some people like me will wear glasses, right? And some people don't. Make sure that when you set up your lighting, that you find somebody that wears glasses and is pretty tall. Now set up the lighting for that person and then just aim the light just a little bit higher, just in case you miss somebody that's even taller. And then use the same light setup for everything. Now some people will go like, hey Frank, for somebody with glasses I set the light a little bit higher, but shouldn't I set it lower for everybody else? No. You want to make sure that when you do headshots that all the images look exactly the same. So it is boring, I know, but it's exactly the same images because you want to see it in a website and it has to even out. So you don't want to look at a website go like, ooh, all different colors, it turns me off. No, you want to look at a website and you go like, ooh, this is nice and even and everything is in balance. So that means when you shoot those headshots, you set it up for the most difficult person. And it's always somebody that's tall and wears glasses. So I'm always the one they pick. If you set your light up for that, the only thing you have to bring with you is a little stand. Now you might want to, I hope I pronounce it correctly by the way, but I mean like a little apple box. Because there are always people that are shorter than me, hardly anybody that's taller. So you want to make sure that that lighting setup is set up for the one with glasses, that's the tallest, but you have to make sure that the shortest one doesn't fall down. So in steps, maybe 2 or 3 apple boxes, make sure that everybody has the same height, and then you shoot those images, but make sure that the backdrop and everything looks the same. So although I'm not a big fan of shooting on tripods, in that case I would place my camera on a tripod, and then I will just raise and lower the podium on which the people stand to make sure that everything fits nicely. And that, boys and girls, will get you the edge over your competition, because you have continuity in your shots, everything looks the same. And with your competition, sometimes they shoot lower, sometimes they shoot higher, a little bit left, a little bit right, and the light is different. So you deliver something to your client and it's not uniform. And that's very important for those clients. But if I do a CEO portrait, or somebody that wants to apply for a job, then I have to be more careful. And that's more like an, well, build to order, build a bear kind of light. Like, okay, do you like it dark? Do you like it white? Well, let's shoot both, but make sure that you ease your sitter in. So the setup, we're gonna go to the studio with our model Nadine, and she's gonna apply for a job as, what are you gonna apply for? A belly dancer. No? Movie star. Well, I'm self-employed. So you're self-employed, so for bankruptcy. Or you see where I'm going? Of course, now I'm joking with Nadine, but you have to make sure that you know what she wants. Does she want to be the business person, or does she want to be the open one? And this is important. A lot of clients will come in a suit. And in all honesty, the best shots are often with just a shirt and jeans, for example, because in modern days, let's be totally honest, you don't really want to be a suit unless you're in the upper class. Everything underneath, you have to communicate with your audience online, often very important in modern businesses, but also with your employers. And nowadays, employers are not what they used to be. We have something called quiet quitting. Do exactly what you need to do and nothing more. I'm totally against that, by the way, but that means that there's a totally different mindset. So if you're a boss and you want to have authority, you might think, hey, wear a suit. Not really, because nowadays most people will just look at you and go like, okay, as soon as you turn your back, we're going to have fun. But when you look more open, you actually give something to your client, but also to the ones that working below you. Like, hey, that's a guy I can talk to. That's on my level. He's maybe my boss, but he's not wearing a suit. So I think for a modern headshot, I would very much steer away from suits. Yep. Unless you're a lady, of course, and you're called Nadine. Hey, let's go to our studio, and that's very close by, so just stay tuned. And we're gonna do some photo shoots with Nadine. Are you ready, Anouk?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm gonna switch over cameras to the set. So let's go for camera 3. Awesome. And we're gonna do picture-in-picture in a moment, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anouk is taking over from me behind the desk. And let's go through that workflow. Okay, here we are. Hello Nadine, how are you?
Fine.
The first thing, of course, is you make sure that your model is at ease in front of your camera. Now this is a mistake that's made a lot, because you are busy, right? So what's the worst thing you can do? That's actually pick up your camera and shoot it and go like, next, shoot it, next, shoot it, next. People will go like, what is going on? What I always try to do is I know I can get my shot within 3 or 4 tries. Let's be honest, it's a headshot, right? In this case, we're going to do something more personal, but I'm going to start with the headshots. I will always take into account that I need at least 2 or 3 minutes with each client to make her at ease. So I'm going to go like, hey Nadine, how are you doing? Fine. Where do you work? Do you work in the cafeteria, or are you higher management?
Well, I have a vintage store.
You have a vintage store. Awesome. So how many employees do you have?
On the moment, 2.
2. Awesome. Great. And do you see them a little bit as yourself, or do you feel like you're the boss?
No, I see them as colleagues.
You see them as and at this moment, I already know that she's a nice girl because I'm talking with her. I can look in her eyes. I know exactly how she feels. And I also know that it's very important for her to be open, to see them as colleagues and not as employees. And this means that instead of shooting from a lower angle up, making her look more majestic, I'm actually going to shoot it from more eye level to make her more on the same level as I am. And do realize one thing, it seems like these are very, very small details. Your mind is a beautiful thing. If you shoot from slightly lower, your mind will immediately go like, ooh, more majestic. If you shoot from eye level, even up to low, your mind will do tricks with you. So as a photographer, it's very important to also study a little bit about the psychology of how people work. One great guy is, for example, Peter Hurley. He has a whole book about this and just tells you about micro expressions and the squinch and whatnot more. But he goes really deep with this. For me, it's just find a person and make sure that she's at ease in front of the camera. Now, to make somebody at ease in front of the camera, the first thing you have to make sure is that the images that come in look awesome, right? Because what if she gives me a killer shot and the first shot I take is way underexposed? Then I'm trying to figure it out. Oh, one moment. That doesn't really give you a professional look, right? It's like with a dentist. So where does it hurt? Here. Okay, should I just drill or do you think it needs... No, you're the dentist. And as a photographer, you're the photographer. So don't just try. Make sure that everything works. Now, in this case, Nadine is already here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a light meter and an extra remote control. Let me see where I put that one. I'm pretty sure I had it.
I'll get you a new one.
Ah, you get me a new one. Ooh, do we have new ones? Or is it the used new one? Ah, awesome, it works. Ah. Okay, so light meter. Always the base, always the start. And as you can see, the light setup is very, very simple. We're using a beauty dish, rather high up, aimed a little bit down on our model. We have a beautiful Click Pro backdrop. That's a mouthful. There we go. F22, that's a little bit overkill. So let's go down a lot. Okay, there we go. Just want to have a little bit of a depth of field. F11, that's okay. Okay, oops. Let's grab the camera. Let's make sure we're on ISO 100. And F11. Okay, let's take the chair out. Okay, first shot, very simple. I'm going to shoot from a little bit ice perspective in this case. Nice, Nadine. Wonderful. You look beautiful, amazing. As you can see, I'm also easing my model into the shoot. You look great, you look amazing, wow. But don't overdo it. Don't do it like, oh yeah, you look great. No, that's very, very scary and it doesn't really work and get you into a lot of trouble with the police and everything. Don't. Be nice, be gentle, but don't overdo it. Now, when you look at the shot like this, what's the first thing that you notice? It's a lot there, right? It's a lot on the chest. And we don't want that, of course. We want to make sure that the face is properly lit. Now, this is something where we use the light meter a lot. Now, of course, you can now just figure out how it looks, but it's way better to use a light meter for this. And because we have to set it up for one person, this is going to work like a charm. The first thing I already know is I have to aim it a little bit more up. And of course, with my eyes, I can already see what's going on. Yeah, it looks like this is great. But with a light meter, you have so many more options. Just look at this. I can now meter in front, 11.8, so that's not F11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So F11, 8.07, okay. Chest, 8.05. Above her head, 5.69, that's F8 here. 5.65. And 8.03. Okay, 8.03, we're shooting on F11. I think that's nicely balanced. Most of the light is now hitting her face. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. But look at the difference. And now imagine that I did that the first time right. Takes away a lot of the stress from the model, because now she's going like, oh Frank, my chest is way too bright. And you don't want that. You don't want your client to immediately go like, hey, my chest is too bright or this doesn't work. You want to make sure that the first image that comes in, the model goes like, wow, I really like this. Now, when you look at the shot, is it right for a portrait? I like it, but I also think it's way too dark. I think we need to lighten it up. Now, one of the things that a lot of people will say, okay, move the light further away, create a bigger beam of light, and at that point, you light everything better. Yeah, and no. Watch this. What you can better do, because I want a little bit more light on the backdrop, is actually ask my model to do one step backward and move my light slightly further away. And now I'm just looking at everything. There we go. The only thing I want to check now is, do I like the shadows? By placing my model a little bit closer to the backdrop, I'm actually using something called the inverse square law. Light falls off over the distance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And because light falls off over the distance, it means if I move my light further away and my model closer to the backdrop will start to bloom up much more. And with these kinds of backdrops, I really like that. Okay, so we're going to shoot the same thing. F11 again. Okay, I have to zoom in a little bit more now. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is much nicer. Also a little bit more filled in. As you can see here, not straight on the face. So let's aim that up again. Nice. Okay, there we go. Okay, so relatively simple portrait. Very classical. This is not something that I would actually deliver to a client. I think for a client we would go for gray or white. But in this case, I think for this client, she's owning a vintage store, right? Vintage backdrops, vintage store, awesome. But when I look at the image, it doesn't really excite me. It doesn't really go like, wow. But I don't want to lose the simpleness of the image. So I want more light on my backdrop. I don't want to lose that simpleness, so that little bit of a butterfly effect, aiming light straight at our model. And I don't want to use too much light because, again, still it's a business portrait. It's not a model photography, because with model photography we do Rembrandt and we do a lot of lens flares. In this case, we want to make something more interesting. Now, I always tell people, when you go to a cosplay workshop, it's so much easier to do a family portrait. Because if you know how to run a marathon, you don't have any problems with 1 kilometer. So, what we're going to do is, and it's already there, we're going to use a strip light. And instead of placing my model closer to the backdrop with the risk of, well, a lot of shadows, I'm actually going to ask my model to step away from the backdrop, and a lot. There we go. And we're going to use the strip light slightly different than what you're used to. Now, when you look at the strip light, you will see that it's high and not so wide. And that means that we have a narrow beam of light, and we can really steer that light, but we have it over a huge area. And the cool thing about about strip light is that we can also do this. Now there's something else with the strip light. The center part is always very bright, and because we're using a grid, and now you know why I love grid so much, the sides are always a little bit darker. Now I'm using a gray grid from Light Tools, and it actually gives me a nice smoother transition between those two. So how am I going to use this? First of all, I want to light my backdrop, and I want to give my model a kiss of light. And I want to make sure that I don't have any shadows on my backdrop. When I look at that shot, it doesn't really excite me, but it's also not a shot where I go like, oh, that's bad. It's somewhere in between. It's acceptable, but it's not something that I want to deliver to my client, although in essence it looks great. But hey, we want something more. So let's try a sandwich technique. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place my strip light dead center between my model and the backdrop. You can angle it a little bit, if you like that. In this case, let's angle it. Don't turn up the volume too much. Let's start with a really in the middle setting. Now this is something I sometimes call cooking with light. I'm just going to look at the image. Do I like it? No. Okay, let's turn it down or turn it up. With the main light, that's the light we always meter. We never ever set it up like that. We always meter the light. The backlight, that's the one where we start to angle, where we see the filling lights, etc. So let's first meter our main light. And in this case, because this is the final setup, I'm going to do it professionally. A little bit more secure. There we go. So face, 16.2. It's too much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2. That should be F11. It's always tense with the light meter and strobes. Okay, 11. Chest, 8.06. Above the face, 5.67. This is not that important, but hey, we're dead center now. This is awesome. Backlighting, no idea yet. So let's see what happens. Let's first do the shot without backlighting. And because we're now playing a little bit, I'm going to do lower angle shots because I really like those. Okay, so this is without that strip light. This doesn't look bad. It's actually a great shot. I really love this, but everything is wrong about separation. This is something where the model really gets sucked into the backdrop, and in all honesty, not really my thing. So let's turn on the backlighting and let's see what we can do. Okay, perfect, I hope. Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, look at that difference. Now you can see a little bit of light on the backdrop, really nice. Let's enhance that. Let's give it a lot more. Nice. Okay, Nadine, can you look straight at me? Perfect. And as you can see, I'm not changing a lot about the lighting. I'm now including the strip light so you can see how close it is. But I'm just giving a little bit of light on her face and most of all that separation on the backdrop. Now, if you have a more, well, old-fashioned client that goes like, I don't know, I don't really like this, you can always very quickly change this over by just taking this light source, and if she doesn't like the fill-in, and you do want it a little bit, you just aim your light like this. Maybe she likes the arrow a little bit down. So let's do it like this. Aim it up. So I'm now mostly focusing on my backdrop. Is it okay with the camera? Okay, awesome. So it all depends on what my client wants. And that's the nice thing about shooting tethered. I see everything coming in. So as soon as my client sees it coming in, she goes, oh, Frank, I really like this, but. And everything before but doesn't matter. Can you make it a little bit more that light also hits besides me? Because now when you look at it, it's nice on the right, but on the left it's a little bit too dark. And I still feel that my beauty disc is a little bit angled too low. Let's aim it up just a little bit. There we go. Okay, we can do that. No problem at all. I'm going to turn on the volume a little bit higher. And I'm going to place my strobe just a little bit closer. And I'm going to feather it more away from our model. And these are very, very tight adjustments I'm doing. Very, very slight. Sorry. Okay. There we go. So now we have a lot of light on our backdrop. And maybe our client goes like, ooh, Frank, something in between. Okay, no problem. You place your light and just pull it slightly towards you. And there we go. And now it's somewhere in between. Okay, let's do it like this. And of course, let's take some real portraits, of course. Nice, Nadine. Love it. Cool. As you can see, it's a very, very powerful setup and it's very easy to do and you get some great results. Anyway, you have a question?
Turning on the mic. Yes, there's a question about hands.
Ah, hands. Yeah, what about hands?
Can you tell a little bit more about coaching hands or posing hands?
You can't coach hands because they don't have ears. I will do that later on there. Okay, let's do a few more. Can you look that way a little bit? I will talk about hands in a second, don't worry. All hands on deck. Nice. And with portraits, I always try to keep it a little bit like you can see the top of her head. When I shoot for myself, I would go in much, much closer and do it like this. But on the other hand, she has this really nice roll on top of her hair, which I really like. So this time, I'm actually going to include the top of her head. Awesome. Nadine, you can change for the next set. I'm going to talk about hands with them. So I'm going to switch over again. Let's not wake Shui. Okay, the images look okay. When I look at the monitor, the images are always a little bit too dark. Okay, let's switch over to my cam. Okay, so that's actually a very good question. A very good question. How about hands? What do you do with hands? Well, the thing that you don't do with hands is this. And now this sounds ridiculous, right? But it's not about holding my hand in front of my face. It's actually about this. Do you see that the hand is now pretty big? Look at this. The hands become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it almost disappears. So the thing is, a camera doesn't see depth. The only thing a camera sees is stuff that is closer is rendered larger, stuff that is further away is rendered smaller. Now, one of the things that you don't want to do with hands is make sure that the hands are in the frame, like, hello, jazz hands. No, you don't want that. You want hands in the frame as being gentle, as being nice. Now, because this camera is closer on me, I'm going to use myself as a model, which I absolutely hate because I'm a photographer and there's a reason for that, behind the lens. But when you shoot hands, you will always try to get the smallest part of the hand. So, for example, if I'm doing this, yeah, that's not really good. But if I do it like this, the Steve Jobs look, that's a lot better because my hand looks smaller. But when I do this, it doesn't really work. But when I place my hand here, it becomes smaller. When I do this, the hand is much too big. So what a lot of people also do is place the hand on the face and then you do stuff like this. And as you can see, this doesn't look right? It don't call an ambulance yet, there's nothing wrong. But you know what I mean, like they're pulling it down. Or they press really hard into the flesh. What you don't want is that kind of stuff. So what I always tell people is, if you want your hands next to your face, make sure that you can touch your earlobe, because then you're already at the back of your head. Turn it away from the camera, so the thumb on your neck, and then just gently, oh, it feels good. No, I'm just kidding. And gently just hover your hand above, or your fingers above your face. So if you're a man, you can barely feel your hairs over here. And this way you have a really nice flowing image where the hand doesn't show up like this or is over bright, but it's all the way in the back, so it's as small as possible. You already turn it towards the camera with the side, and you don't press into that flesh and you don't pull it down, and that way it works. Now, I know that a few years ago, and this is not a joke, I think it's ridiculous. I saw an instructional video like, hey, hands are the most difficult thing to shoot, so just don't include them in the picture. That's not the solution. And then I started looking more in like, okay, what is the most heard complaint about hands? And that was always too much light. Well, that's a lighting mistake. So we can cross that out immediately. That's a lighting mistake. But how about hands that are too big? Well, most people, and think about this, they shoot in the studio with a 70 to 200 mm lens, and there's a reason for this. On 200 mm, everything is compressed. And that means when I'm shooting on 24 mm, the hand looks like this. When I hold my hand in exactly the same position and I would shoot it on 200 mm, it would look like this. 400 mm, it would look like this. And it's in the same position, so that means that although, for example, 24 mm gives you this distance, the more you zoom in, the more the scene gets compressed and the more that hands come toward the face. It will never be at the face, of course. Hey, that's impossible, maybe with 800 or 1200 mm, but it will just creep closer and closer and closer. And it means that the face will get bigger or the hand smaller, depending on which side you look for. Now, most portrait photographers will still use that 70 to 200 lens, and that actually makes it a lot easier compared to what I do. I always use the 24 to 70. And the reason for this is very simple. I'm shooting more wide angle. Now, the reason I'm shooting more wide angle also has to do with compression. Now, let me put it this way. If you see a ball, it's round, right? But how do you know it's round? And that's very simple. That's because you see the curvage, right? Now, the more you shoot with a wide angle, the more that curvage comes in. So that means that if I have a ball and I shoot it on 70 mm or 200 mm, it will get compressed. So that nice round effect will become round, but not round. When I shoot it on 24 mm, that round effect will become this. That's way too much. So most of the time I will shoot it between, let's say, 40, 60, 70. I'm creeping towards 70 from 50. So I'm always between that 40 to 70 range. And that way you can create nice depth in your images without that flat feeling. And I do remember when I did that for the first time, I was always shooting with the 70 to 200, and I got never complaints about my photography. I was like, oh, great photos, awesome, that's nice. And then I started shooting with the 24-70, and that was because my 70-100 broke down, so I needed a separate lens. So, okay, I have the 24-70, let's use that for portraits. Oh my God, I'm going to use the 24-70. In all honesty, after that, it never left my camera again. For the very simple reason, and this is so weird, at that point I was shooting with medium format cameras and my DSLRs. And the medium format camera always has this nice round effect, like almost three-dimensional. And I was shooting for the first time with the 24-70, and everybody was going like, oh, I love that medium format look. And I was going like, wait a minute, what's different? And then in Lightroom, I actually saw it myself for the first time, and that's like an awakening. You look at your images and you go like, oh my, I know what's going on. With your medium format camera, you have a frame that's twice the size. But on a medium format camera, I also use an 80mm to shoot portraits. 80mm. But that's not really 80, that's about 50. So I was already shooting wide angles on the medium format camera, creating that nice round effect, which in your mind, I never took that link. It's just like, yeah, it's a 50mm compared to. But then on the DSLR, I didn't. And that round effect, that actually was that awakening moment for, okay, that's where that round effect is coming from. So I started shooting more and more with the 24-70, and all the people were going like, oh, everything looks more three-dimensional. And for portraits, especially for business portraits, that also can give you a little bit of that edge, because the images doesn't look compressed, but they look a little bit more open and round. So that's why we use that lens. Okay, let's see. Hi from Australia, Blues Napoleon. Hi, I didn't see you a lot online, so it's great that you're here. This is the best photography channel in the world. Oh, thank you so very much. That's nice. Let me see, Michelle. Or Michael, do you something different with the light and posing for male and female clients, not models? I'm also using soft light. Let me think about this. I don't think so. I actually think that with male or females, when we do headshots, I don't change anything. When we do it in the studio, I think I let male a little bit more like this, like their hands crossed and maybe the hands on top or underneath. More tough, right? And I think the females, I try to be a little bit more open, more engaging. And of course that's totally wrong to say, but I think that's in my mind what I do indeed, that I make the guys a little bit more muscular and more profound and arms crossed. And with women, I try to do it a little bit more softer. So yeah. Not really something I do intentionally. It's just something like if you post somebody, you just see it, you know. And I think this is nice to address actually. You have all these posing books, right? So 1,000 poses or 360 poses. Although those pose books are really nice to start with, I found out that in essence it doesn't really work. If I look at myself, for example, if you shoot me straight from the front, I look okay. I exercise a lot, I do a lot of mountain biking, and my front looks pretty normal. But as soon as you turn me, I look like the Michelin Man. I look like totally like Santa Claus. I have this big belly. So when I look at a posing book, and especially with how to pose a male, they always go like, okay, 45-degree angle and then look straight into the camera. With me, no, absolutely not the 45-degree angle, because I look like that. I want to straight on. But every posing book goes like, no, never straight. You see where we're going? And this is the same thing, by the way, if you shoot, for example, a family portrait and the female wants to be alone in front of the picture because, well, the mother of the family, right, she also wants a photo because the man wants it, right? And let's say that this person has a little bit of an oversized look, which is normal, right? And how do you hide something like that? Because you want to make a glamorous shot and everything you normally do is fashion, right? Now, one of the things that is really nice for this is actually use shadows. Now, let's say that I want to lose my belly. Then I will just aim my lighting from this side. I will look that side and I will literally turn a little bit towards the light and let the shadow take everything off. So with this setup, we use very flat lighting. But if you continue this train of thought by using that light as a sandwich, you can imagine that you can start using your shadows to curve off certain areas of your model. And this is what I think is mesmerizing when you look at what you can do with lighting. You can literally create everything you want. If you have a really big model, like a plus size model, like, whoa, you can still slim her down to very, very normal sizes. Everything is normal, by the way, guys, so don't flame me for this, but you know what I mean, right? But when you have a really skinny model, you can do exactly the same. By using shadows, you can create a little bit more depth and a little bit more meat on the bones. So you as a photographer are very, very powerful, so make sure you never abuse your power. What did they say? With great power comes great responsibility, right? We're going to set up for the next setup. Oh, first we have another question from Paul. Do you have any advice on shooting portraits where the model is wearing a hat which can cast a bit of a shadow on the face? Yes, take off the hat. For a headshot, without any doubt, take off the hat, because we have to make sure that everything is standard. For model photography, why bother? It's great if you have a little bit of shadow. If you don't want that shadow, lower the light. And it's very simple. I always go like, think about Dexter. Dexter, the blood spatter specialist, right? He comes into a crime scene and he immediately sees which knife was used, if it's a blunt object, because look at the spatters there, it was carried from there, and he draws all these lines. I never see a photographer doing that, and I'm doing it constantly in my head. I'm constantly drawing lines. For example, if I'm wearing my IQ wire hat, the best static cables in the world, of course, the fastest and the most stable. Hey, that's commercial. Just kidding with you guys, but it's true. So when I look at my cap and I would lower the light, this will happen. Now, if I would raise the light, this will happen. And that's very simple. Angle of incidence is angle of reflection, but also that goes for the shadows. So if you have your light very high up, it will cast a shadow. If you have your light lower, it will not. Now, let's say that you really like this look, but you want to open up the eyes. That's where you use a reflector. A reflector on the bottom, bouncing that light back into the face of the model. And by changing the distance of the reflector, you get more or less light on your model. Imagine the inverse square law. Now, by the way, there was a video online where they explained the inverse square law as if you double the distance, you have one stop more. I'm so sorry to burst you guys' bubble, but the inverse square law is really simple, guys. It's not doubling, it's quarter, because it's the inverse square law. And just think about it. If you move your lights, it doesn't double, it's the square. So, if you want a video on that, just leave comments below and I will make a video explaining the inverse square law. Really simple, because it's incredibly easy to see and also in the studio. Okay, we're going to set up the rest for the next shoot, and for the next part we're actually going to sit down with Nadine and we're going to talk about styling, because you guys also had some questions about styling. So Nadine will be here any moment, and then we're going to continue with our styling part. But first, time for some breathers. Hey guys, and welcome to our studio in Emmeloord. My name is Frank Dorhoff, and today I want to talk to you guys about something that we get a lot of questions about. Hey Frank, how do you like this image? Hey Frank, what can I improve in this image? And of course, I love to help you guys out. But online, I mostly am limited to just saying, hey, I really like it, or continue like this, or change this. I can only do short images because, let's be honest, we get so many questions. So that's what actually got us thinking. And we started a Patreon. Now, what is a Patreon? Well, let me put it this way. Do you want an extensive photo critique every month? Do you want the bed phone, where you can directly contact me with any questions you have? Do you want to be a member of a group that's closed off on Facebook that have the same interest as you guys? That isn't about putting people down, but it's actually about helping people progress in their photography and retouching. Well, that's our Patreon. Now, by joining our Patreon, every month you can deliver 1 or 2 images. We're not that strict about it. And I will do a whole video. In that video, I will show you how I would do the retouching, what I would change about the shot, and I give you a whole lot of tips. That video is put online on a closed-off website. And it means that only the guys from Patreon can see that video and help you out. So I help you out, and the whole community helps you out. It's just an awesome way to learn. So, if you like what we do, of course the first thing you can do is subscribe to our channels, leave comments, and smash that like button because we really like it, and tell other people about it. But if you want to do a little bit more and help us out creating the awesome programs you enjoy, like Behind the Closed Doors, Digital Classroom, quite frankly, our upcoming podcast, Beyond Photography with the Dorhoffs, and a lot more, then please join our Patreon. I already know you're absolutely gonna love it. So head on over to the link below and start joining our awesome group on Patreon and get a lot of benefits. Thank you so very much for supporting our work. See you online. Okay, and I'm joined with Nadine. And Nadine, this is your mic, so if you hold that one. Okay, so I'm gonna look at that camera, of course. And Nadine is sitting behind me. So sorry, we didn't have an interview set up because this was last minute because you guys asked like, hey, Nadine, what goes on in your mind when you think about styling for Frank? Nadine.
Well, a lot, of course. I just do what I feel like it, I suppose. But that's also because I'm working as a stylist for a long time now, and I think you can train it a little bit. So it's a way of thinking, and if you do that a lot, you start to see in everything you do and everything you see and everything you hear even, you see something that inspires you.
Like music.
Yeah, music or a movie, but even flowers or water or the weather or clouds, it doesn't matter. Or if you're walking through the street and you see someone else with a special kind of clothing, or even not that special, but just a pattern or a color combination, it can be everything.
Yeah, and then can you turn on that light for me, please? So Nadine has a little bit more light on her. There we go, and just aim it at Nadine. Awesome. Look at that, wow. Hey Nadine, and by the way, you are the owner of a vintage store, and didn't you win a prize? Tell people about your store and the prize you won.
Yes, we won a prize for the best fashion store in our region.
Arnhem, right?
Yes, yes, and we had how you call it, the highest ranking, like the highest score. People found our store the best in service.
Appreciation.
Yes.
And the weird thing is, it is true. And this is actually something that I think a lot of people get wrong. You know, when you look at styling, and I remember the first time I met you, I was at professional imaging and one of my models got really sick. And I put this question out like, hey, I need a model who wants to go, and we have two options. You can get paid and you can get a print, or you can get a TFP shoot. And most of the models, in all honesty, at that point, they were still going like, okay, let's get paid or whatever, and we're done with it. And Nadine was the absolute opposite, and that really surprised me a little bit. Like, oh, I want a TFP shot. And at that point, I did all the styling myself, and I was a big fan of David LaChapelle, so blue and over-the-top colors and everything, and big dresses, but somehow the big dresses never worked for me because I couldn't get those dresses, and I wasn't very flexible with materials. We did something with firecloth, organza and everything, and that worked great. And this is actually where you should find somebody that has that little click of you, like Nadine has. They can open up so much more for you, because I learned so much about using styling with very cheap materials. And the weird thing is that as soon as you see it, you go like, why the heck didn't I do this myself? So Nadine, what is that weird thing in your mind that makes you create something from absolutely nothing that looks stunning? What, how?
Well, it's probably also a way of thinking because when I was little, we were pretty poor, very poor. So we did stuff with what we had, and that was not much, but you get creative by that, and it's not always a bad thing to don't have anything other people have, or not having the money or ability, because it trains your creativity. So it's funny that you say also our first TFP shoot, because I didn't came with a big dress.
No,
I said I wanted to be a rock star. And
including the sweat.
yeah, and you thought, well, okay, this is gonna be a Britney Spears lookalike thing, and then I want to be like, well, a glam metal.
Yeah, more
80s
like a
rock.
hard rocker
Hard
and
rocker,
smoke
indeed,
and gels.
with indeed the sweat. So, and that's also because you don't have all the stuff maybe on that moment, like big clothes and paillettes and glitter and stuff that's in fashion, but you can make it in fashion if you are creative.
Yeah, I remember that when we did Photoshop World a few years ago. That was so awesome. So I have to make something clear, and let's turn off her mic. No, I'm just going to leave it on. Aniek and Nadine are the worst people to travel with and do workshops for. And I'm going to tell you why. They think I'm one of the best photographers in the world and I can do everything with lighting. But I'm just a fool like you guys. I'm very lucky and I know a little bit about lighting and technique, of course, but I'm far from being the most creative or best photographer in the world. But those two are constantly pushing me. So what did they do? So normally when you travel and you have a Photoshop World, the Photoshop World is one of the biggest events, right? The best instructors, the best models. So they flew in Nadine and
Well, thank you.
you think like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna go to a store and we're gonna buy like a gala dress or we're gonna buy something amazing and something cool. And those two, okay, Frank, you cannot see what we bought. And I was just going like, okay, so what now? She came in and the first thing I looked at and I said, you look like a freaking carrot. Green with orange. It looked terrible. You know the fun part? We started creating images and they looked absolutely freaking awesome. And this is the part that I can't stress enough. It is not important to have a model or stylist that is great at styling. It's also very important to have a model and stylist that understands the limitations but also the possibilities of the photographer they work with. And we always make the joke, like if Nadine and I work together, it's not 1 and 1 is 2, it's 1 and 1 is 4 or 5 even. Because somehow there's something that happens. And you can see it in the expression, in the styling. We just push it a little bit further. And that's because I'm pushing her and she's pushing my buttons. And the more I get frustrated by something that I don't like, somehow the better the pictures become. So the carrot really worked. So that was about that. So another thing that we hear a lot about styling is, should it be expensive? Now, first, my personal opinion, yes and no. I think a great Gucci dress or whatever, Versace doesn't make dresses, right?
Yes, of course.
Oh, of
Versace
course.
make
Oh,
dresses.
I'm so
Shame on
sorry.
you.
I'm very tired. Versace was the first thing that came into my mind. I was like, oh yeah, of course. So a dress like that is awesome. And in all honesty, not everything is built like Gucci or Versace or whatever. So sometimes you don't need that. What I always like to do is, also because I'm Dutch, and it's a running gag, is make it as cheap as possible, but create something that's awesome. And we did it with window shears once in a Levint machine.
Yes. Yeah, and well, of course, it's not always expensive in the sense of money, but it takes sometimes a lot of work.
I sometimes see work on stuff that's absolutely like €5, and they spend 20 hours building it. It's the same with the cosplay models. You see the suits and you go like, oh, that's so awesome. Where can you buy it? And they go like, buy it. If you buy it, it's junk. We build it ourselves. And we go like, how long? 100 hours, 200 hours, 300 hours. It's insane the amount of time they spend. So do realize that it doesn't have to be expensive, but spend time. Like those little crystals you put on your arms.
Yeah, but also the Dragon Lady, of course.
Yes.
The basics I made before, and we also made those Marie Antoinette style paper dresses, 3 of
Yep.
them. So that was also a lot of work.
Garbage bags.
Yes, garbage bags, of course. But those are quicker because they're big.
Yeah, and they smell.
No, they don't.
And one day we had let everybody bring in hats, and we created this whole wall with hats. And we had one with newspapers. We had one with plastic.
Post bags also.
Yeah, post
Those
bags.
blue, that was
And I
awesome.
love that shot. It was like an alien coming out of a starship with smoke. And when you look at the shot, it's amazing. It's like welder's goggles, and it's a little bit of smoke, and everything is paper bags. It's nothing more. And when you know it and you look at the shot, you go like, oh my God, I see it. And before you didn't even realize that. And that's, I think, something that really brings Nadine to the table. Like, wow, that is awesome to work with. Any more tips, Nadine, on styling before we continue?
Just try.
Just try, right?
Don't think it's not going to work. Just try. And if it's not going to work, well, okay, that's too bad. But then you know it, and then you try again.
Yep. You know, you can go to the set if you want.
Okay.
Not that I don't want you here anymore, but hey, you can prepare. Okay, so let me rephrase that last thing that Nadine said, and I think that's very important, and also realize this, how important it is. I love playing guitar, and one of my favorite guitar players, of course, after Brian May, that's my favorite one, is without any doubt Steve Vai. And not only because he's great, but also because he's a great human being. And most of all, because he tells you stuff like most interviews you get from artists are always the same. You know how they started, you know what they do, you know their physics, you know everything they do on the guitar. And it's a little bit boring sometimes, like, oh, we have an interview, oh, I really like his playing, but oh man, it's the same again, watch an hour. With Vi, you always see that he throws in so much psychology. And one of the things he said that hit me like a sledgehammer, and I was going like, this is my motto for the rest of my life. If you think about failure, you failed. Every time something doesn't work, it's not a failure. It's only a failure when you stop. As long as you continue your work, it's never a failure. It's just one of the stepping stones towards success. And somehow, if you are able to reprogram your brain that way, disappointments become motivation. And I know it's very difficult because I can't do it. In all honesty, something goes wrong, I go like, and I become really frustrated, and I want to do this right. And on the other hand, it's a little bit what he says. If you fail, don't stop, don't give up. Just continue. Now, if you followed my work for many, many years, you know that one of the things that I always tell people when I do a normal seminar is the first slide is about photography. And I always tell people there are 3 choices in life. Give up, give in, or give it everything you've got. The first 2 I will never do. The third one, that's my whole life motto. And it fits so great with what Vi said. Don't see anything as a failure. See it as a stepping stone towards success. And I think with styling, Nadine just hit it on the nail. If you take a picture and it doesn't look right, we don't go, oh, this doesn't work, let's try something else. No. We're going to make sure that it works, and we're going to change the stuff over. Okay, I want to show you something very quickly. I recently did an interview with our good friend Jessica Duc, and you can now find the interview, No Watermark Photography Podcast, everywhere on Spotify, Apple Music, so much more there. I believe Google. Like everywhere where your favorite podcast is, you can find it. And it's a very honest interview. It was given in a time where we were literally not in a good place. And I share a lot of tips about just struggling through stuff, and also about opening more options for your own, how do you call it, progress. So I think that's very interesting. Okay, so we have a question from Frank, actually, not me. Let me go to that one. And that was actually, let me go all the way to the back. And he asked me like, hey Frank, how can I make something like this more interesting? And in all honesty, I don't think it's a bad shot. I think there is a lot of stuff that you can improve, but it's not bad to start with. So we decided, you know what? Let's create a red backdrop and just do the same kind of shot, but do it my way. And I hope they changed all the cameras to the new position. And then we're gonna see what we can do with a shot like this. Oh, come on. Listen to me, Lightroom.
Which background do you want?
The red one. So if you can set that up. We're gonna show a very quick video until we set everything up. We're gonna be right back after 1 minute and 36 seconds. Oké. Even kijken, dan moet ik alleen nog mijn cascabel aansluiten. Ah, daar is hij alweer. Dat ging goed. Oh. 1 minute 36 was very, very fast, so it's already done. Okay, so what I did, let me just explain very quickly what I did. So I'm using the iPad Pro at the moment. Let me just go to here. I don't even think I started the video, but anyway. Okay, so one of the things that I love to do in the studio is actually shoot tethered. So what is tethered? Tethered actually means that we are connected to a device. In this case, of course, an iPad Pro, but you can also shoot to your laptop. Now, the software where you shoot to is very important. You can use Lightroom to shoot tethered, or, for example, Capture One. Yeah, somebody already said something goes wrong, you are in the air, no commercial. I will do the commercial in a second. So, when you shoot to a laptop or to an iPad, the main attraction is, of course, that you can see your images coming in and you can zoom in. So you can really dive into details. And on the back of your screen, that's something that doesn't really work. So what I'm using is, we're using, of course, IQ wire cables. One of the main advantages of those cables is that they're 10 meters long or 5 meters long. But they have IQ Connect, so that means that we're always shooting on the highest possible speed, and they have boosters. So that means that if you have a camera that has, for example, micro USB, you don't have to buy a micro USB cable. You just buy the IQ wire cable and you get a little converter cable that actually converts it to micro USB, USB 3.B and mini USB. And on the other side, we can also go to USB-A for the older computers. Since we're using that cable, we can now also use other software on the iPad, so everything came a little bit together at that point. And that software is Cascable. Now, I can't stress this enough. Shooting to an iPad Pro or an iPad is one of the things that will really change your workflow for the better. A laptop is great, but you always need to place a laptop somewhere. And with an iPad, we can just clamp it into a holder. We're using the Ulanzi, for example. And that just works like a charm. And Enrique is just giving me the converter cables. So these are converter cables. We tested them all. A lot of the converter cables didn't work. We found stuff that did work. And of course, red, our color. And it just makes it, we sometimes say like, hey, the IQ wires are the next generation in tethering cables, one cable to rule them all. So we have 2 movies in, well, 1 commercial. Okay, anyway, so shooting tethered, sorry. The software Cascable is something that I highly recommend, and we get so many questions about it, so this is why I address it at the moment. As you can see here, this is the software, and the thing that I really like about it is that you have on the iPad, which at this moment I don't use, and you have tethering. And the nice thing about the iPad Pro is that it now has a file system. The bad thing about the iPad Pro is that Apple literally just makes you sandbox it. So for example, if I want to read comics, most of the apps I have to connect it to my computer and copy comics into a special app directory, something that I hate to do. Cascable makes it possible to just make an alias. So when I go to files, I can actually see a folder with my photos, and then I can copy them over into Lightroom and start editing. Furthermore, the software really is nice. You can have live view, which in my opinion, I never use it. You have neutral density filter calculation. For example, you want to shoot on 1/4 of a second. You have a shutter speed of 1.2 because I'm using a 1-stop ND filter. And you can just calculate it, for example, for skies or for sharp stars. Look at this. You can even go for sharp stars. So I'm shooting the sky with a 24mm, and I have a full frame. I don't have a Nikon. Come on, I have a Sony. Why is there no full frame Sony? What the heck? That's bad. There's more cameras than Nikon. There's even Canon, of course. Oh, Canon is crop. Where's Sony? No. We don't have Sony. Okay, guys, don't buy Cascable. No, I'm just kidding. So you can calculate, like I have 24mm. I want to make sure that my stars are sharp because the Earth rotation, of course. So maximum shutter speed is 25 seconds. Do it in that period and you have sharp stars. This is something that for a lot of people is awesome. But also, think about this, tracking location. Or of course, shooting tethered. So for workflow, I absolutely highly recommend Cascable, but do make sure that you check the compatibility list. Not all cameras are also supported by using USB. Most cameras are supported by using Wi-Fi or the wireless transfers inside your camera option. That's something that I would highly recommend against. In the studio it works, in your bedroom it works, at home it works, and as soon as you do something important, it doesn't work or it comes in way too slow, and for RAW files it's unusable. So make sure you check if your camera is supported by USB. Now we get a lot of questions from people that say, hey, I downloaded the trial and it doesn't work, Frank, how is that possible? This is one of the things that I don't like about Cascable, and I really don't like about it. You have to buy Cascable to test if it works with a wire. I think that's ridiculous, but hey, that's the way they work, and all the power to them. The software is great, but they have a few options. I believe for €5 you can use it for 1 month, and that's actually how I did the trial twice, and it didn't work twice. And then they released a version with the Sony A7R IV, and I was going like, okay, let's buy it again, and then it worked. Now, in all honesty, if it doesn't work, you just mail Apple, I want a refund. But after the second time, I was going like, But they did it, so Apple, great for that. But when it works, only high prices for Cascable. They should actually make it a one-day free trial to test if your camera works. They can't lose anything about that because the software is great. And I think now a lot of people will just leave the software because they have to pay for it. And I think that's a mistake. Okay, so Cascable, absolute, highly recommended for workflow. Let's go to our studio and let's create something that Frank sent me, the other Frank. And let's see if we can make it a little bit more interesting. And again, the shot was already there. Let me see if we have anything in between. Had to pause the stream because of a phone call. That can happen. Great advice. Oké, helemaal goed. Wat zeg jij nou weer? Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the studio. He's already in split screen Anouk, so you can take your place. Okay, so I think what Frank used, or at least what I'm going to use, this Frank, is I'm going to use a strip light. And this is a setup that I normally love to do with speed lights and flash benders. Because with the flash bender you can really sculpt that light to whatever you like. So let's take a strip light. And when I look at the image from Frank, he really uses it from the top down. So I'm going to do exactly the same. Oh, sorry. Did I hit you?
No, of course not.
Okay, try it again. Okay. So let's place this pretty close to the backdrop. Okay. Let's angle the light. And let's first turn it on. I'm not that tall. Okay, close to the backdrop. Aim it down. Don't hit your model. Okay. And now comes the million-dollar question. How much light do I want on the backdrop? Now, when we look at lighting, lighting actually most of the time works the same, except with Fresnel spots or spotlights. The center is very bright and very, very, very harsh, right? But the more you go to the sides, the softer the light, but also the less light output. Now, beam of light. And that's actually what we're going to do here. I'm still using that grid, but by changing the angle of my lighting, I can literally just change the look of everything. Sorry. I can literally just change the look how it feels. Okay, so let's grab a light meter. And let's see what the meter reading is. Oops. And I would go a little bit that way. Perfect. Okay. .68. Okay, 2 clicks up, that's F8. Okay. Okay, first shot. There we go. Something goes wrong there. Excuse me. I think I metered wrong. Oh, yeah. My mistake. There we go. Yep, 16.5. Don't press the memory button on your strobe meter. Okay, F8. Perfect. Okay, how to make it more exciting? Well, first of all, let's shoot it in landscape mode. There we go. Now, when I shoot something in landscape mode, I get more breathing room in my image. So that means that I get more of the image that's filled with the backdrop. And that already creates more breathing room. So in all essence, they call it negative space. I would highly recommend calling it positive space because it really adds something to the image. Now, when you look at the image, it's totally different from the one that Frank sent, right? It's more focused, Frank has more light on the subject. So let's change it around a little bit and give Nadine a little bit more light. Now, I already told you everything is about feathering that light source. But in this case, I'm not feathering it away from the model. I'm actually going to feather it towards the backdrop more. Now, because I'm using a strip light, as I explained in the previous set, you have those 3 strobes. One on the sides that are a little bit softer, and one in the middle that gives you a little bit more oomph. So let's use that oomph. Let's oomph it up. I'm going to change the lighting. I'm going to change this closer to the backdrop, and I'm actually going to aim it slightly more towards Nadine. So I'm going to loosen this up. This is always the difficult part and the dangerous part, because I don't want to kill you yet. Maybe in a few years or so, when we're old. Awesome, F8. Okay, let's change this just a little bit. There we go, and a little bit more light on the top. 8.05, you see the difference? That's huge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, F8. So one little change, already half a stop. That's insane, that's a lot of light extra. Okay, this is more what I like. So we have more light on the backdrop, we have a little bit less on the model. This comes very close to what Frank did. The problem is, Frank wanted to make it more interesting, more exciting. And if you just tune in, Frank is somebody that sent in the picture, it's not this Frank. So what he did probably was do this. And I'm going to remeter this, because we're going to place it back. By changing this towards our model, there we go, we create more light on our model. And of course you can also take out the grid, do the same thing, but let's keep it this way. So now we have more light on our model, just a little bit. And by moving it further and further, we continue to increase that light on our model. But the main problem with this is, it also takes away that nice contrasty look. So let's place this back. Almost flush to the backdrop. And by the way, we're using click-prop backdrops. We are the Dutch distributor for that brand. And they photograph like insane. I just love this stuff. Okay, so this looks nice. I can always shop out that top part of the strobe, but now make it more interesting. Okay, to make it more interesting, we always have to think about what do we miss in a shot. Now in this shot, I love that high contrast look. It's really great. The thing that I miss a little bit is fill-in. So let's take a strobe and let's just place a blue gel on it. Oh, by accident, we already have that. Oh, it's awesome, right? And we're going to use a technique called light in light, and it's not that difficult. Oops. Okay, so we're going to take the... Okay, then just do it like this. Our stands are getting a little bit old. Okay, let's turn that up. Now you might wonder, like, Frank, what the heck are you doing? I'm bouncing off the ceiling, guys. So let's turn on the strobe. And let's see how far. It's on 5. Let's turn it a little bit up. Okay, there we go. Now remember this shot. Okay, that's too little. You can see it already a little bit. Let's turn it all the way up. Let's see what happens then. Nice. There you go. This already makes it a little bit more creepy, a little bit more interesting. But in all honesty, well, I'm wasting a lot of power. I'm only filling in the shadows. Can we do it better? Yes. Remember that strip light that has many different options, right? Okay, let's start over. So let's turn this one off. Remember, nothing is a failure unless you give up. So Frank, the other Frank, what you could have done is use that strip light and do exactly the same I'm now doing with fill-in flash, but just angle the light. So let's take this one. So we're going to destroy your setup, and we're going to use it like this. Going to aim it down, go all the way up, aim it down even more. Make sure that I hit her face with light. Can you stand a little bit? Stop. Now she's in the hot spot. Back to the ceiling. Oh, sorry, to the wall. Perfect. Okay. So this is without that extra fill-in flash. It's a really weird setup. Can you move a little bit that way? Yes, perfect. Turn on the light meter. Okay, 5.68, 2 clicks, F8. Okay. Now I have to fine tune this. This is just the base. And the top I will probably have to clone out. Or maybe not. No, it's okay. Okay, so now without using that fill-in flash, I already get more of that light on my model. So now the clothing is already better visible. I am a little bit underexposed, so I'm going to open up just a little bit. Okay, that's better. Nice. So by using the same strobe, I'm now covering a lot more of that light of our model. Yes, Annewiek, you had a question.
Do you always use your strip light that high?
No. I don't use the strip light always that high. I just change depending on how I like it. In this case, Frank, who sent in the picture, had a really high up light. So I'm doing the same thing. And I think in this case, it really does work, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, now let's turn on the blue again. And look at the difference, because first it was really blue and normal light combined together and fighting for a chance to be visible. And now, by using that light that way, we're blending them together a little bit more. And there we go. And this looks so much more in balance. This is not like a dark side with a little bit of blue. This is just a picture that just glues together. And for me, works so much more interesting than the previous ones. And this way you create an image that's not only different, but that really gives you an edge. And this is something when you deliver it to a client, the client will immediately go, ooh, this is different. Now you might wonder, Frank, the face isn't really 100% natural anymore. Yes, if you don't like that, no problem at all. There comes in the next trick. Now there will always be a little part of blue in our face. But there's a trick, and it's called the color checker. Now, Calibrate is a company that is specialized in everything that has to do with calibration, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. And Calibrate also has a tool, I think it's vital for every photographer in the world, and that's called a color checker. And in this case, we're going to use the color checker passport. Now, normally when you use the color checker passport, you do it like this. So you turn off the lights, everything that has gels, you turn off. You give your model the color checker, and it's only about the top piece, so make sure that there's no fingers on the top piece. Light it as flat as possible, and shoot it. Perfect. Okay, so that's part one. This is the one where we create the profile later on in Photoshop or Lightroom or Capture One, whatever you want. That's the profile. But remember, we had that part of her face where you didn't want that blue in, but you wanted a little bit else. Watch this. So normally you always have to turn off your gels because you want the colors to be natural and the gels has to be added. In this case, when you want the face to be natural, we're going to do differently. Hold it in front of your face like this. Now I'm not going to light it flat. I'm actually going to aim it like this. And now when I later do a color balance on that white, the face will be normal and everything else will still be blue, but a little bit less blue. So that trick will actually help you out. And I will play some of these photos online later on so you guys can check it. Okay, let's take some more photos with this, because I really like this setup. Nice. And do remember that when you walk around your model, you can create totally different looks. So this way you can also make it way more interesting and way more engaging. Hands a little bit more towards you. Perfect. Because he's literally on the edge of my backdrop. Oh, love this. Nadine, you rock. And of course you can do it very high contrast by going all the way here and maybe even include that strip light for some extra effect. Maybe even lower. Hey, why not? We love our Hensel lighting, so let's show it. Awesome. So in essence, how to make it more exciting? Maybe include the light source, maybe include some blue, maybe include some angled lighting. You have so many options to make it more interesting. And it doesn't have to be your taste, but maybe you can mix it in for 10% instead of 100%. Just be creative. Okay, I'm going to go back to the desk. Final set for you. We're going to talk about time management and some other stuff. So I'm going to go back to my desk. I hope I didn't say anything weird when I didn't start the commercial.
No, you didn't.
Oh, thank God for that. Okay, now let's start the commercial the way that it should be. 1, 2, boom. The Light of the Old Masters. Isn't that a great title? But what is it? Well, in the old days, we all know those pictures, right? Harcourt, George Hurrell, film noir. It's that awesome look where you have total light control. Well, this video is all about total light control and mimicking the look of those old masters. But we're going to do way more because we are not in the old times anymore, of course. We are in modern times. So we're going to talk about using flags in a modern studio. Of course, combining continuous lighting with strobes for a film noir look. How to create those really nice harsh shadows on your model, for example, from blinds. And of course, how to get mood in your pictures. I'm going to share a lot of different tips to get a nice glow in your images without breaking the bank. We're going to talk about specialty lenses like the Lens Baby system. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff that really adds that magic of the old masters to your images. The video is available now and I'm 100% sure you're going to love it. It's very technical. But I'm very sure that even if you're a beginner, you get a lot of information out of it. But this is the video about total light control, glamour, the light of the old masters. Available now. Okay, let's be a little bit more serious now. One of the questions I get a lot is about calibrations and about color management, but also about monitors. And I thought let's just throw them all into one big pile of questions and let's just go through them one by one very quickly. Now, when we work as photographers, there's one thing that's very, very important. That's one, we freeze unique moments in time that never come back again. So be respectful for your camera, for your work, and also for your model. You never know what's going to happen, right? The other thing that we do is we have to deliver something that's good and that works. Like, for example, my IQ wire, red, and my band is red. But when I compare the two, they don't really look the same. Now, when I go into Photoshop, I can absolutely make those two look exactly the same. And this is something that, without you knowing it, you actually do. If you don't use a light meter and a color checker. Now, all the colors in the world, when we go back to digital, are represented by 3 coordinates, an X, a Y, and a big Y. The X and the Y are hue and saturation, the skew and the saturation, of course, how intense a color is. But the big Y, that's actually the luminance of a color. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that if you lower the luminance of a color, you also get a more saturated color. So reds become more red. The nice thing about using the luminance of a color to manipulate the color is that you don't clip any color channels. If you use vibrance or saturation, at one point you will start to lose detail. Use luminance on the same color and it will get more saturated without losing any detail, so you don't clip anything. And this also works for monitors. Now, a few years ago, Emmeloord ordered, I believe, a red sweater and a red scarf. And they looked exactly the same on paper and also on the monitor. I don't really remember if it came from a catalog or from online. They got it in, or we got it in, and it didn't look at all. We had to send it back because I believe the scarf was more orange and the sweater was more burgundy than red. It just didn't look right. So, where did it go wrong? Now, you have to realize that when you send something back, there's a huge chance they just destroy it. So, in other words, you as a photographer are responsible for a lot of waste. And it is easily solved. Use a color checker when you shoot something and create a profile for your camera. That way you know exactly the colors are right? And you do that for every single light setup. The other thing is, of course, if you have your color checker and your light meter, so your luminance is right and your profile is right, how do you get it on your monitor? Well, we use BenQ monitors, and the reason we use BenQ monitors is very simple. A few years ago, I was in conversations with a larger monitor brand and they wanted me as their ambassador. And the only thing I had a little bit of a hesitation against was they used in-board calibration units and the price was pretty steep for those monitors. Now, I'm an ISF trained calibrator, so that means that I know how calibration works and I also know how analysis works. And in this case, that was a little bit of a disadvantage for that brand because the 3 stimulus meters they are using don't hold their stability for over 5 years. And they told me 10 years. When I asked them about it, they said, well, we know the panel degradation, we know the degradation of the analyzer, and it's no problem, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I do worry about it because I know that for my professional work, I change my analyzer every year. So for normal work, I would expect something like that. At that point, we were at a trade show in the UK, and next to our booth was BenQ. They came over to me and we already knew BenQ from the computer company, great stuff for very affordable prices, but always the best stuff in the world for the very simple reason. For example, their monitors, the lowest lag, so all the gamers that came into our store, they wanted BenQ monitors because, well, the low lag. That's how fast the monitor responds, so in a game you have a little bit of an advantage. BenQ told me they wanted to make monitors for photographers. Now, I'm very picky about this, and there's some stuff that I really want in a monitor, and that's first of all Adobe RGB. 99% Adobe RGB is great, 89% great, 98% great, 99% even better. So 98%, well, no problem, okay. I said the other thing, color uniformity. I want to make sure that my corners are not darker, and I want to make sure that the corners are not a different color than the center, because I also do black and whites. No problem. Okay, great. That's something you want to see, by the way. They can tell you that, but you really have to see that. And BenQ actually did keep their promise. I never had any problem with color uniformity on their monitors. Also not on the other brands, by the way. If you pay enough money for a good monitor, it shouldn't really be a problem. Or just exchange the monitor. It shouldn't be there. Cheaper monitors, yes. Okay, the other thing was hardware calibration. And this is a big thing. If you use normal calibration, you use software. And in software, think about it at Photoshop. If you have curves and you do it on 2 points, that will be fine. But if you start pulling on 3 points or 5 points or 6 points, that's where you start to see solarization, where you start to see less smooth gradations, and it just doesn't look right. A calibration is done in many different forms, on many different positions. For example, you have grayscale on RGB, you have gamma, which is how the curve walks, but you also have your CMS, which actually contains of those 3 coordinates. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't even know. All those settings can influence the way that your image looks on your monitor. Now, in most cases, you will be fine if you have a professional monitor. But if you ever try to calibrate, for example, your laptop screen, you sometimes find out that that beautiful blue sky now shows a little bit of those nasty, not so smooth transitions. And that's actually where the calibration goes wrong if you use software. If you use hardware calibration, it actually means that you are not calibrating in the computer, but you're calibrating a table inside the monitor. And this is huge because you have way more bit depth and the monitor just stays way better in its smoothing graduation. I hope I pronounced it correct. It just looks better and smoother. Now the question comes, hey Frank, oh, nice that you sell BenQ monitors. Cool that you know about calibration. Dude, you're dumb because all my clients use monitors that are not calibrated. See, I got you there. No, you didn't got me there. Let me explain, because this is actually the most asked questions ever about color management. Why should I calibrate my monitor if my client doesn't use a calibrated monitor? Listen to this and try to understand it. If I look at the screen and my blues are always a little bit too saturated, I'm used to that look. Now, you might think like, hey, nobody calibrates, but most professional photographers do calibrate. Most professional filmmakers use calibration and color grading. Now, if I'm used to having a little bit too much red, a little bit too much blue, a little bit undersaturated greens, I'm used to that look. Think about somebody that's colorblind. They're used to that look. So if you calibrate, your image will look exactly the same as those high-end professional photographers that do calibrate. They're wrong, but they look the same. So for that client, those images look great because he's used to that image, right? Now, if you don't calibrate, and let's say you have 5% too much green, and your client looks at a monitor that has already 10% too much green, your greens will really jump out, especially if his monitor is underexposed on red and yours is also underexposed on red. You see where I'm going? It's all adding up. And at one point you can look at an image on an uncalibrated monitor and go like, hey, looks pretty cool, no problem. And then you find an image and it looks like crap. And that's what we want to prevent. We want to make sure that all the colors in the color space, and that means that red, for example, has 254 different gradations. And this is what a lot of people forget. They think red is red. No, there are 254 gradations. And you have that for cyan, magenta, yellow, green, and white. Also white. Then you also have the gamma, which literally is the curve. So all those things together, imagine if one thing goes wrong. It's like a puppet. If one string breaks, the whole puppet falls. So this is why you should always calibrate your monitor, even if your client doesn't use a calibrated monitor. And the BenQ monitors, for the pricing, I can highly recommend them. They're really awesome. But there are other brands out there too, but we use BenQ, so I think that says enough. Let me see if we have any questions here. Be careful with the power cable from the... Yeah, I know. We're always careful with power cables, but during digital classroom not. I'm so sorry for that. Do you have your strip light always that high? No, not actually. It really depends on what I want to do. Sometimes I have it really high up, aimed down to get a really high contrast look under the nose. And sometimes I just lower it to have a little bit more softer light in the face. It's all about what you want, right? If you want more contrast, aim it higher to have the deep shadows. If you want less contrast, move it further away from your model, aim it a little bit lower. So the closer the light, the quicker the light fall off, the further away the light, the softer the light fall off, but also the softer the light. Aim the light away from your model, use the sides, softer quality. Move the light closer, quicker fall off. You see how many options you have, it's mind-boggling. And I remember when I started writing Mastering the Model Shoot, that Scott Kelby told me, like, every book should have diagrams. Now, with Scott Kelby, I'm very clear. And I don't know if Scott is watching, but I think Scott is one of the best guys in the whole world. For the very simple reason, he's a real person. He's not somebody that acts. He really cares for everybody, and he tries to help everybody. The only thing I didn't agree with him, and that was the only thing, everything else I had my mind set up. I'm a very stubborn person, and if I have my mind set up, I'm going to do it that way. With Scott, I was literally like, and a week was later in the hotel room, said, I never saw you so like, yes, we're going to do that, yes, we're going to do that. She said, I thought you would put up a fight. I said, no. I said, because he knows how to write a book. He wrote so many bestsellers, so just listen. The only thing I didn't agree upon was lighting diagrams. Now, if you look at my book, Mastering the Model Shoot, and all the other books, you will see lighting diagrams, because Scott Kelby is right. If you don't have lighting diagrams in your book, it won't sell. Awesome tip. However, with my lighting setups, you saw that during the live shoot, every time I just aim my light a little bit, it's half a stop more. And that's also what frustrated me when I started with photography. I had all these books with these example photos, with lighting setups, and I never ever could nail it until I found out that those lighting setups didn't work. And at one point I just saw lights coming from that side, and I saw in the lighting diagram lights there, and I was going like, okay, this book is crap. The thing is, especially when you're using lighting like I do with grids, just a very slight change will change a huge amount on your set. So no, I never set my lights up exactly the same, but I try to do it similar. Okay, let's go for something else. This is gonna be funny, I think. So, one of the other questions is workflow, but most of all, time. How do you work with time? Now, I'm going to be very square with you guys at this point. I'm working on a review for a program called TimeBro. And I'm not done yet. I'm almost done. The reason I'm not almost done is because I want to make it sure that you can see when I'm scrolling. And because we're now using Wirecast on my laptop, I can't show you the scrolling part. But I did take some screenshots because I think it fits perfectly in this setup. So what is TimeBro? Let me first explain what TimeBro is. TimeBro is a software package that actually tracks your time. It sounds weird, right? I thought so too. So when they asked me like, hey Frank, can you do a review for this? I was first going like, I don't know why. And then there was something that clicked a few days ago, and I was really like, hey, wait a minute. One moment. Oh, oké, gaat goed. So, the thing is, what's this? I lost my train of thought. Okay, so first of all, let me do this, 3 clicks. Okay, this is how it looks. And this is my time tracking from Monday 5/9. And on 5/9 I had an assignment for a client retouching images and also shooting those images. Now when you look really close, you already see the main benefit of this software. I can literally see per minute, and I can zoom that out to seconds, and I'm going to show you that in the video we're going to upload probably next week. Per second I can see exactly what I've done, exactly how long I spent and which filters I used. So if a client ever asks you like, hey, what is your pricing for this project? And later on he goes like, yeah, I think you overcharge. I overcharge. Okay, no problem. Look at this. This is time, bro. This tracks my time. And you can literally show your client per image how long you worked on it, but that's not all. If I go here, you can literally see also how my day looks. Like for example, in this case, I started with the Capture One session. After that, I did something in Lightroom, and I started working on my first image for an hour. That was to get everything right. But look at this. You can even see, and this is the cool part, what filters you used. So normally I opened up those images, but I also used in those images 1.96% I used Liquify. This was a really tough assignment. And even when you want to hide something, with Time Bro you can't. And I'm a little bit ashamed of this, but you know, I don't use Puppet Wrap a lot. And for the love of God, I couldn't find Puppet Wrap anymore in the new Photoshop. I think it's been 5 years ago or something that I used the last time Puppet Wrap. And for this, I really needed it. And I was going like, where's Puppet Wrap? I don't know it anymore. So I went onto Safari and looked up, where's Puppet Wrap? Look at this. You can see that I'm working on his set. I'm working on a set number 59. I'm opening Adobe Photoshop for set number 5, number 60. I went into Lightroom again. Oh, I don't know what Puppet Wrap is. And I literally went into my Safari, Photoshop, where is Puppet Wrap? Google search. There's no hiding anymore what you do. And that also gives me to the next part, and this is the fun part. Now, I love playing guitar. And one of the things that I love to do is just play with backing tracks. So I'm sitting down, I'm using my guitar, and I'm playing with backing tracks on YouTube. And what I do is maybe not too smart, but I just type in a Lydian backing track, that's a certain tone. And I find all this stuff like, hey, Steve Vai style, ooh, nice Steve Vai, click. Now the nice thing about YouTube is that those backing tracks are about between 5 and 10 minutes. And you're playing, and then you're done. And you go like, nah, I don't want to do that song again. And the nice thing about YouTube is on the right side, you see suggestions. And you see, oh, soulful blues metal. Oh yeah, let's do that. Click. Oh yeah, that's a great song. That's a great song. And you go through, and after a day or so, you're done. And you've done maybe 20 backing tracks. And now you go like, oh, I really like that one. Which one? Now you go into the history of your of YouTube, and that's not really useful sometimes because you can't know when you played it or in what state. With Time Bro, you just go like, oh, wait a minute. I remember it was after that groovy guitar. Oh, wait a minute. It's epic, atmospheric, melodic rock. Oh, yeah. And where is that? YouTube Watch. Okay, just copy it. And there you're done. These are the things that I love about Time Bro. It's so detailed that you can literally just go in and find all that stuff. So not only for clients, but even for the rest. Is it all perfect? No. And I'm going to do that in the review too. Here you can see that on Wednesday 14/9, that's when we did a big photo shoot with a client, and I also started retouching. Now on that day I worked about 13 hours. And this is cool because now I can tell my client by the minute and even by the second what I did for him. This is when we shot this image. This is when we shot this image. At 10:45 we shot this image. However, the thing that I miss a little bit about Time Bro is, and that's not really a bad thing, my workflow consists of a lot of iPad Pro retouching. Because I have the Apple Pencil, I can sit on the couch, it just works a little bit better than on the laptop. And most times I can get away with the iPad Pro. On the other days you see that I hardly worked. That's not really fair, right? On Saturday we used the iPad Pro to shoot to. On Thursday and Friday I did retouching sessions on the iPad Pro. And the only thing you see is actually that I worked for about an hour on my laptop, and that was actually the syncing process. So although it's not 100% on all systems. I still highly recommend you guys to check out TimeBro, because also here, this is from the last 4 weeks, and we've only been testing it for 2 weeks. I can literally see, where do I spend most of my time? Oh, that's on Safari. Okay, and Logic Pro X. Oh, I made a lot of music. Yes, because the last 2 weeks I actually had a lot of free time. We had a few big assignments, and when I'm done with those assignments, I take a little bit of a time off. But you can also see that we use Mighty Editor, we used Compressor, Adobe Photoshop, Mail, Camtasia. I think this is very, very valuable, especially if you want to know, like, hey, where do I spend all my time? Can I really maintain this workflow, or do I need to adjust it a little bit more? Now, if you guys are interested, we, of course, made a really cool deal for you guys. It's a free trial, but also if you want to continue with them, and I highly recommend it, just go for TimeBro and use Frank15 for a 15% discount. And as mentioned before, this is a sort of commercial, because we are not, how do you call it? I'm not using the software myself, and I always want to be clear in this. If, for example, I promote Capture One, it's because I've been using Capture One for years, and then I promote it. TimeBro literally approached us like, hey Frank, we love your style with Digital Classroom. I think you will love our software. And they were right. I love their software. But I do want to make sure that you guys realize that this is something that I'm asked to review, and I'm honest with you guys. I love it, but I do want to make that clear, especially nowadays. Okay, so let's turn that off, and let's go back to Cascable for now. Okay, done. And let's open up my camera. Let's go for Sony Reconnect. Okay, and because I was in Lightroom, I have to disconnect my USB and do that again. And there we go. Awesome. And make it big again. Okay, so for the next set, we're going to go back to the studio, and we're going to have some fun with Nadine. Oh, Annemiek, you have more questions.
No. It's just Michael says he's making his own diagram.
Oh, wait a minute.
When he knows the client will come back.
Oh, yeah, he can do that too.
Yeah.
Okay, I have something else here. Sorry, we have questions in.
Which color profile?
Yeah, which color profile do you set your BenQ monitor to? I think this has to do with the problems when you calibrate. I found out, and that's something that I still have to short with BenQ, and I didn't short it with BenQ for the very simple reason it works. If you set the monitor on Adobe RGB and you calibrate, which in my opinion is very logical, calibrated on Adobe RGB, the results are always a DE of 5 or more. And DE means deviation from what it should be, the delta. And that just doesn't look right. It just looks like crap. And the thing is, we get a lot of emails about this. And the thing that you just have to do is don't calibrate on Adobe RGB, just calibrate on the monitor itself. The outcome is awesome. It looks great. When we remeter it afterwards, it's 98 or 99% Adobe RGB, even when I do it with a professional analyzer, which is way better than, for example, the calibrites we're using. But it's an analyzer that retails for about 7,000 euros. So yeah, that should be better, right? So we're very close to that Adobe RGB space, but I don't calibrate in Adobe RGB. And I've had many BenQ monitors, they're all great, but with me they're all calibrated on the standard setting, so not Adobe RGB. And afterwards they meter exactly Adobe RGB. So I don't know why it doesn't calibrate right on Adobe RGB, but the solution is very simple. The other thing you have to realize is use profile version 2. Now you have a version 4 and a version 2. Always use the version 2. Don't ask me why, but when you use version 4, I have a lot of problems when I go from Lightroom into Adobe Photoshop that there's a slight, and sometimes even worse, remember that calibration about the puppet? Sometimes there's a slight difference between Lightroom and Photoshop, and sometimes there's a huge difference. Now the reason for this is Adobe, I think, uses Miranda RGB as a working space internally. So they still use Adobe RGB, sRGB in ProPhoto, but there's also something called Miranda space. And I think when you use a version 4, that doesn't really translate well back to Photoshop. Now this is information that's already on the market for about 5 or 6 years. And since then I always use version 2, so maybe nowadays they solved it and version 4 works. But if you have those problems, try to calibrate on version 2. and then it will just work like a charm. But you have to go into professional mode for that and not the click it and you're done mode. Okay, let's go back to the studio and let's shoot our model. Well, photograph our model. And you already see how it looks and it's awesome. I'm already looking forward to this one. Okay. Ooh. Nadine, you look absolutely stunning. Look at the dress, look at everything spread out. And this means, of course, that we want to make sure that we capture everything. But I also love the backdrop. And this is one of the things that I really want to stress with you guys. If you want great images, do realize it's always a combination of your backdrops and your model. And one of the things that we started doing really fast in our studio was get rid of seamless paper. We still have seamless paper, but I never use it unless it's really necessary. So we started painting the walls of our studio. And that looked absolutely awesome. I really liked that. And then we found out about ClickPro backdrops. And the nice thing about these backdrops is that they photograph really nice. When you look at the shot, even when you see it now online, do they see the image, Annemiek of Nadine? Can you go to split screen? Nee, they see the image of Nadine with the strobe in? No. Okay, go to split screen. Okay. Now, when you look at that shot, you see that the strip light is almost touching the vinyl. But do you see that there's no reflection on the vinyl? You literally see the light and you don't see any reflections. And that's a huge thing for backdrops. Most backdrops we tested in the past were always giving a little bit of shine. And that's something that I don't want in my backdrop. I want it really flat. I want it three-dimensional in print, but flat in lighting. And that's what ClickPro Backdrops really does well. We have the Pro Fabric and we have Vinyl. Vinyl is more for the prints, and Pro Fabric is more for this really old-fashioned look, like old canvases. And we have our whole studio filled up with the stuff. And starting in March this year, we actually became the distributor in the Netherlands for ClickPro Backdrops. After using them for how many years, Annemiek? 2? They have my signature series and we've been using them for 2 years. And something's changed for us in our business and we decided to become the official distributor for ClickPro Backdrops. And we couldn't be happier. The backdrops are amazing, right, Nadine? It really triggers that creativity. Okay, hey, I want to make sure that I light my whole model, but she's against the wall. So I have a problem. Because when she's against the wall, I can't place any lights next to my model. And that's a problem. Because if I can't place any lights next to my model, I can't really use side lighting. Well, let me try if we can get something that's similar. So I'm going to take this strobe. This is a beauty dish. We of course love beauty dishes because they're beautiful. And we're going to place this here. And I'm going to use it to literally only light my model's face. Now, in most cases, this is very easy to set up. In this case, it's very difficult because I have a lot of studio lighting on. And I think for this setup, I am actually going to turn off the LED lights for a second, in a moment. Because I want to make sure that my light is aimed correctly. So let's first turn it on and then turn off all the lights so you can see what we're doing and how I set something like this up. Okay, so let's turn off the LED panels. Okay, so what you now see is that we actually have lit the whole set and our model. And this looks okay. It looks fine. Let's just take a shot. When the light is off, everything looks better. Even me. 5.64. Okay, let's go down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go to 5.6. Let's give it a little bit of an edge. Okay. 5.6. Let's shoot it in portrait mode for now. Love it. Really, really nice shot. But it's not really something that gets me excited. It gets my juices pumping like, wow, this is amazing. It's okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to aim the light really on the face of the model. So we're going to take a grid, and we're not going to take a very big grid, but medium. Let me see where I place that one. Yeah, let's take the thickest one we have. So I'm doing the opposite of what I just said. Let's make it myself more difficult. Okay, let's place this in front of the beauty dish. Okay, now the reason I turned off the lights is because now I have to aim my light, and I literally have to ask my model, can you see through the grid? No, of course not. Right, right. Okay, can you see through the grid? Yeah? Okay. Now the reason I'm doing this, if the model can see through the grid, she's in the hotspot of the light, so I don't have to worry about that. And I also trained my model at the moment that she has to look through the grid, because then the image is right. Right? Yep. I love the word right. Okay. Let's take a picture with this. 5.64. Amazing. Oh, okay. So that meant the light wasn't perfectly set up, because I'm actually having more light now. Okay. There we go. And this is way nicer. The only problem I have is I don't see enough of my model. Okay. Now, let's turn on the studio lights again, because then it's easier to see me talk. Okay, now there's something in photography that you have to study that's actually pretty simple. We work with stops of dynamic range. Now, there was this guy called Ansel Adams, maybe you heard of him, and he dictated that 18% gray is middle gray. And this gives something weird. If 18% is middle gray, what is 50% gray? And that's where Adobe actually said 50% gray is digital middle. To confuse it even more, that's 128 in digital. But let's go back to Ansel Adams. So 18% gray is middle gray. Now you can start calculating. So what do we do if we want something pure white? We go one step up, that's 36. One step up is 72. One step up is 144. Now with modern cameras, there's a little bit of a shoulder. So you might say if we open up 2.5 to 3 stops, everything will be pure white. And we can do the same thing for black. If we go down 18, 9, 4.5, 2.2, 1.1 and even lower. And that actually means that we have 4 or 5 stops down. And this is where it becomes interesting, because now our model is properly lit, but that under part, I want to make sure that I still see detail there. Now when I take a light meter, and I know it's 5.6 on my model, I can use a spot meter, and in this case I'm going to use incident meter. I can just meter here, 1.0. That will not register on any camera. For the very simple reason, it's too much of a difference. So you don't even have to shoot it, you already know it. So how do we solve this? Well, incredibly simple. Remember light in light? We're not going to use a strobe with a gel. We're going to use a strip light. So I'm going to take this strip and I'm going to place it very close to the original light source. Because where first we used light in light, bouncing against the ceiling, we're now going to use it under the same angle, and this actually limits the chance of having double shadows. You will get it a little bit, but it's not that obvious. Awesome. You don't really have to point it perfectly, you just wiggle it a little bit until you think it's okay. So we're going to place it next to our strobe here, turn it on. And now for the fun, turn this one off. Okay. Grab a light meter, and remember 5.6 on the top, and the bottom, well, what should we do? 2 stops lower? I think that's nice, because then the model still jumps out on the top, and the bottom part is nicely filled in. So let's go for 5.6 on the bottom, on the top. Let's go for 2.8 on the bottom, and it was 1.0. So let's go. 2.87. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2.8. Perfect. Let's turn this one on again. Do make sure you remeter the face, because maybe there's a little bit of extra light. In this case, I don't think so, but hey, you never know. 5.6. Perfect. Okay. And now look at the image you see now and the image that comes in. It's subtle, but oh, you can see a lot more detail. There we go. Okay, now I have all the detail I want. The model really jumps out, almost like a snoot, and you still see a lot of detail in the dress. Am I done yet? No, I want to make it more interesting, right? Now, one of the things I already talked about with the business portrait is the angle. If you shoot high up and low, you get something interesting. But that's not often what you want. Well, it looks great. Looks nice, actually better than expected. But what if we go really low on the floor? And in this case, use a little bit of a wide angle. I'm gonna sit down, gonna aim the camera up. That's the nice thing about having backdrops that go really high. Oh, look at this. That's what I like. Wow. Chin down just a little bit. Wow, awesome, Nadine. Let's do some close-ups. Oh. Love it. Do you see all the detail in the dress? And it doesn't look like it's strobed. It just looks natural, like flowing light. And that's what I love about this stuff. It's just, it flows. Okay, so, nice dress. Everything looks fine. Let's just finish the shot with a hint of blue. Yes, a hint of blue. This looks a little bit like Tetris. So let's first take the power cable out. So you don't want to destroy anything. Okay. And let's place this one on the other side. And then take the power cable. There we go. And this is again a little bit like cooking. Shoot until you like what you see. Let's turn it all the way up. Let's try that first. Annemiek, can you turn it up and down when I say? Are you okay? Oh, Annemiek, you can sit down. Okay. I already like it. Look at the difference. Wow. You see that U in there? Now, Annemiek, maybe one thing. Do you see the plinth underneath? Can you change the dress just a little bit to show a little bit less of that plinth? There we go. It's a designer dress, Annemiek, be careful. And of course you can fill also in the gaps, Annemiek, on the floor maybe. Sorry.
We do have an intern, Frank.
Yeah, but she's behind the camera. Are you ignoring my work? Okay, great. And these are the things you can do later in Photoshop, but it's so much easier to do it on the set. Love this. And of course some close-ups. And maybe from a really extremely low angle for the close-ups. This is why I love the 24-70. Look at this. You can't do this with the 70-200 because you simply don't have that reach. And now all the way on the floor. Nice. Love it. Okay, let's do one standing up to show you guys the difference. It's all taste, but I like the other ones better. Awesome. Thank you so very much, Nadine. You were awesome. Okay, let's go back to the computer. Oh, love those shots. Really nice.
This was the last set, right?
Yeah, this was the last set. Yes. Okay. Let me switch back to my camera. Okay. Now, a few things. First of all, what are we using in the studio and what do I really like about using in the studio? Our main strobes are Hensel strobes. In essence, I think there are 3 brands that I really trust, and that's Ellingham, of course, Profoto, and Hensel. I think those 3 brands really give you worth for your money. Personally, we chose Hensel for the simple reason that I love to freeze motion, and the Hensels are just incredibly fast with freezing motion. And the thing that I love about the Hensel brand is when you look at the softboxes, they're a little bit better built than the other brands. So that means that your longevity of your softboxes will be just a few years more. And it doesn't leak light. So some of the cheaper softboxes, you can literally see some light hitting your softbox from the seams. These Hensels are just totally strict and just beautiful. And as you can see here, the recycling time is really, really fast. I can shoot on 12 frames a second and it keeps up. And the flash duration is about between 1/5000th of a second, and it tops out at about 1/7000th of a second, which is awesome on half, maybe 70% power. And that's normal, right? If you go full power, it just drops down a little bit, and on the lowest setting, it's also a little bit less. The other thing that I think is incredibly important in your workflow is shooting tethered. So IQ Wire is a brand that we started with in March. And the main advantage of IQ Wire is that they have the boosters, the IQ Connect, and they're available in 10 meters. And they even charge my camera while connected to the iPad Pro, which for me is a huge plus because I shoot a lot to the iPad Pro. The other thing you really need is the color checker. This is from Calibrate, and I think this is the best one on the market. You have to make sure that after a few years you change them over, and make sure that if you're outside you close the lid as soon as you use them. If you leave them in the sunlight, they will deteriorate very, very fast. So don't do that. The other thing that's really handy in the studio, of course, is a light meter. Now, the light meter I don't show you. You all know how a light meter looks. In essence, do I need something with a spot meter? Yes, no. Okay, and the week is already giving me. A spot meter is very cool because with a spot meter you can meter 18% gray, which gives me as a photographer a really fast calculations, for example, outside if I want to keep detail in blacks or whites. On the other hand, in the studio we mostly use incident meter readings, the same as you saw with the dress, because I don't know what level the dress is, if it's a 10 or 15 or 20. And by using spot metering, I know 18% gray, and I know 4.5 stops down is pure black, so I go 4 stops down. It's a calculation. With an incident meter reading, so the white dome, I just hold it in front of the subject and I go like, okay, I want 2 stops less, 2.8, done. And you saw how easy that was. So spot meters in the studio, not really necessary. If you think, hey, I want a spot meter, then buy something like the Psychonic 758, the 558, or the flagship, the 858. The main reason I'm telling you guys this is the 358, for example, also has a spot meter, but it's an attachment. And the attachment is pretty expensive, I believe 200 euros. And trust me, you will lose the attachment because you have to take something off, put it on. With meters like this, you just press. Let me just show you how it works. It's super simple. So this is incident meter reading, and you just press the dome. Let me see if you guys can see that. No, okay, let me just do it. And now I can see reflective or incident. So it's all in 1 meter. I don't have to change meters. The only thing is, normally I hold it in front of my subject. When I do reflective, I aim it and I look through it. Light meter, very important. For the very simple reason, the light meter and the color checker make sure that you have a base. And that base is always the same, is always stable. So that means, for example, if you're on location and you're working with a laptop that doesn't really have a calibrated screen or an iPad Pro, and you know your presets work for that lighting setup, you can just use those presets, deliver it to your clients, and then later at home just check if it works. And I've done retouches literally on laptops that had really bad screens, sRGB screens that couldn't be calibrated, and the images looked great. They looked exactly the way I wanted because I didn't change anything. I just opened up the images, run the preset, and I'm done. Now, when I have a proper calibrated display, I sometimes just tweak my presets a little bit, but in that case, don't. Okay, final. I think in a studio, the backdrops are important. And of course, we're using the Click Pro backdrop system. But in essence, when you want to build a studio and you don't have a budget yet for normal backdrops, don't buy seamless. Of course, you can buy seamless. But just think about this. Just look at your walls. walls are often great to photograph against. They have structure, they have different colors, you can use wallpaper. So it doesn't have to be expensive. And the main advantage of using a wall or something like ClickProp backdrops is that I can place it against the wall and I can use the ceiling and the walls to photograph. And with seamless paper, you always have to have a distance between your paper and the backdrop, meaning if you shoot under an angle up, you will literally always see the paper rolls hanging, and it just doesn't look nice. So that means that you need height in your studio, which means you need longer paper, which equals more money. So in essence, I really highly recommend getting backdrops like this, where you can place your model just flush against the backdrop and just shoot it the way that it's supposed to be. And they just look freaking awesome, let's be honest. Okay, let me see if there are any more questions. Blue Napoleon, incredible, beautiful work. The Maestro has done it again. Thank you so very much. I'm flattered. Michael says, I make my own lighting diagram when I know the client will come back for a follow-up shoot and he wants the same look. Yes, and I will give you an extra tip for that. What I did when I was shooting medium format is, with medium format, I sometimes had lenses, especially older lenses. Oh, by the way, I do the same thing on my Sony when I use the photodiox adapters. And we're going to do a test very soon from TT Artisan with lenses that are manual focusable, but we're using an adapter that makes it autofocus, but that takes away my aperture. So all my apertures are at f0. So if you shoot for a client, for example, let's say a hairdresser, and you have this beautiful backdrop with your strobes on the backdrop, you have two accent lights and your main light. What I did when I started out was I always looked at the aperture, and it was f11, right? And then I will just put in the EXIF -1 on the back, -2 on the sides. The problem is if you have f0, that doesn't really work. So what I do nowadays is actually in the EXIF, if I really need to make something new, is I will always set my, oh sorry, I did 5.6 on the sides, f8 on the backdrop, f11 on the front. Sorry, I didn't do minus. So as soon as I started seeing those f0 lenses, I started doing what I just said before, sorry. I started doing 0 for the main light, -1 for the accents, and -2, for example, on the backdrop. So instead of using apertures, I started using minus. And that makes it incredibly fast to recreate a lighting setup. Because you just place, for example, any week in the set, you place your light source on f11 or f16 or f22 or f2.8, it doesn't matter anymore. And then your sides on -1, your backdrop of -2. So when you're shooting f11, the sides -1 is f8, the back -2 is 5.6. If you shoot it on f22, you catch my drift. It's very, very easy to remember. And what we sometimes do is we take our phone and we just take a quick snapshot of the setup, which also works like a charm. Let me see. Wim, is my EOS 7D Mark I still a good camera for hobby use, or should I upgrade it? I shoot mainly at daytime and fast-moving sport horses to capture training information. Very simple, Wim. He's a fellow Emmeloorder. Annelie, can I get my phone?
I don't know where your phone is.
Okay, never mind. Oh, here's my phone. Wim, I can take great pictures with my phone. You don't need to upgrade. It's BS to think that you need to upgrade. You know the moment when you upgrade? You upgrade the moment you hit the limitations of your gear. Never before. There's a learning curve, and the learning curve always goes like this. Vroom. When you upgrade, the learning curve goes like this, and you go vroom again. Don't fall for commercial talk. 24 megapixels is more than enough for commercial work. Now, I'm a sucker for high resolution, so I'm shooting with 60 and 100 megapixels, and I love it. Do I need it? Sometimes. No. Most of the times I don't. When we shoot for VB, one of the main advantages for shooting high resolution is we're shooting for VB Suyari a lot in the Concertgebouw. And the Concertgebouw is really bad lighting. So when I shoot something like that on 60 megapixels, it's very noisy at 100 and 4000 ISO. Yes, guys, that's the maximum, and I have to shoot on it sometimes. But because I'm shooting 60 megapixels, I can scale down to 16 megapixels and still deliver something that's printable for the Concertgebouw. And that takes away almost all the noise. So I'm shooting at 100 and 4000 ISO, I crop it down, or I scale it down to 16 megapixels, and I have almost a noise-free image, which works like a charm. So that's why you shoot higher resolutions. But most of the time, it's not the gear, guys. It's not the gear, it's not the freaking lens, it's not the camera, it's nothing like that. It's this. It's what's here and what's there. And of course, what's in front of your camera. So don't upgrade your gear unless you find yourself struggling every time, like, damn, it's too noisy, or I'm constantly missing my autofocus, because the autofocus, of course, is better in the newer cameras. So when you do a lot of action, yeah, maybe upgrade to something that has more autofocus, but don't do it because a new camera will make you a better photographer. That's the weird thing, by the way. If you give somebody a guitar, he's somebody with a guitar. If you give somebody a camera, he's a professional photographer. It's the weirdest thing ever. You know that, right? You see on Facebook, professional photographer, and you look at the portfolio and you go like, yeah, sure. If you're a professional photographer, I'm a professional violin player. So no, don't upgrade your gear unless you need it. Yeah? Okay, next question. Let me see. Oh, somebody else said 7D Mark I is fine. I sometimes use my old 70Ds also with a 5D Mark IV. Newer cameras, it's nice to have faster, easier, but in the end it's the photographer. Yes, that's what I said. Let me see. Thanks, I also make a quick photo of the setup. Yes, that's it. And the plus and min. A little bit about that camera choice, by the way. One of my friends, we actually talked to him at Photoshop World. He does all the photos for NASA and for SpaceX. And he told me that in the swamps, and I hope Eric, if you're watching and I say something wrong, just leave it in the comments below. Eric Kuna, just look his work up online. He's amazing photographer. If you like space and spacecrafts, he's the guy to go to, especially with the Tesla shots and the rockets on the back. It's mind-boggling shot. So he actually told me that because the Artemis didn't launch, his cameras were still in the swamps. And you might think when you see his pictures, he's using medium format cameras or the best cameras in the world. That guy just knows how it works. And he told me there were some cheap cameras in there, some more expensive ones, and he just left them there until the Artemis goes up, and then he will just trigger the cameras. And those cameras are all maybe 10 years old or maybe older. It's about where those cameras are placed and the moment he presses that shutter. And that makes the difference. I can stand there with a medium format camera and shoot crap. And he can be there with a phone and just shoot a way better image because he just knows exactly the moment those rockets fire. He knows when those smoke. And I would just go like, okay, what now? And he just knows that exactly. And that's something you can't never ever do with gear. Think about Dave Black, I believe 11 or 15 Olympic Games that he shot, and still every time he shoots it differently because he's in a different location and I want to make the best out of it. So you have photographers that always go to the same location, it's safe. And you have photographers like Joe McNally, Dave Black, Eric Kuna, who always go like, okay, this is the set, how can we make the set more interesting and don't follow the rules or what we did before. Okay, Anna, we do have questions on Facebook.
We don't have questions on Facebook, but there are a few announcements.
Ah, we have announcements.
The workshop have started again. So
yes.
Every Saturday there's a workshop again. And in October 14, 15, 16, we're going to Brussels, to Belgium,
yes,
for the
photo
days, where Frank will do a lecture on model photography and also demonstrates speed lights and the new Rogue system on the stand of VDAC.
We have our own booth, so make sure you check out our own booth. We are there with our brands ClickPro Backdrops, IQ Wire and Rogue. We are the distributor now in the Netherlands for Rogue, ClickPro Backdrops and IQ Wire, so those brands will be there. And I think 3 or 4 times a day I will go to the VDAC booth. They're awesome people. We did the photo days before with them, and we're going to give small 15 to 20 minutes demonstrations on their booth about shooting with the new Rogue magnetic system using our backdrops. And that's going to be awesome. It's very interactive. We have great models there, great styling by Nadine, and it just looks awesome. And once a day I'm on the main theater, I believe, for about styling and making...
Oh, it's a lecture.
It's a lecture, but it's about styling and making images more interesting.
In a room.
It's in a room. It's not outside.
No, it's not on a stage.
It's not on our RV.
It's not on a stage. And another thing, if you think Emmeloord is too far for the workshops, please come to our workshop in Eindhoven on Sunday, October 30. There's a few places left, and that's also with Nadine.
Yes, and we're going to use Hensel strobes, of course, there. Now, you guys see me doing a lot with the speed lights lately, and that is, of course, that has a reason. Let me explain that. Without going into details, a lot of things changed for our company, and that meant that we needed different brands to represent. And Rogue was a brand that we literally always used. They have the flash bender with my name on it, and I love that product a lot, and I'm using it constantly. In essence, when I use speedlights, I only use Rogue products, nothing else anymore, because it just fits. So when we needed new products, they were actually one of the first, together with ClickPro Backdrops and IQ Wire. So they were all at the same time a little bit. But one of the ones that we worked with for so many years, over 15 years. And we are so proud to be the distributor for Rogue in the Netherlands, because the systems is just awesome. But we do need to make a lot of instructional videos for it, because there is hardly any material in Dutch. So that's why you see a lot of material now popping up with shot with speedlights. I'm still mainly a Hansel shooter. I'm mainly shooting with big strobes. But the last few months, the reason you're seeing so many images from speedlights is literally because we are building up a whole repertoire of instructional videos. How does it work? How do you put it together? How can you create cool effects? And that's the reason why you see a lot of it speedlights. So don't worry, we're still shooting with Hansel 90% of the time. But those speedlights are just freaking awesome if you want to do something that's a little bit more creative. And of course the backdrops we have there, and IQ wire cables. And we have some really cool discounts, of course, on our booth, so make sure to check it out. Anything else, Annewiek?
No.
No?
Was it?
Okay, from our side, we would like to thank you so very much for watching. We'd like to thank BenQ and Rogue for sponsoring Digital Classroom for over 7 years now, I think, right? Or even longer.
No, this is the first episode.
The first episode of the new season?
The first episode of season 8.
8.
So
BenQ and Rogue are sponsoring us for 8 consecutive years without any hesitation and without any hiccups. That's awesome. Now, if your company watches this and goes like, hey Frank, we would like to support your work. We have, of course, our Patreon. You already saw the video for that, and let me put that underneath. But you can, of course, also sponsor our programs and, of course, ask us to review your gear or software. So feel free to drop us an email, and I am 100% honest. If it's not good, I will tell people that. But if it's great, you can trust me to do a proper review. Okay, let me see. Okay, we have somebody else. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to say this because I think it's fair. Frank says, I bought a Kate backdrop, but it's full of wrinkles and I can't remove it. Do you have any idea how to try to steam it with no luck? Okay, let me do this very, very carefully. I would send it back and order a ClickPro backdrops. And I will tell you exactly why. And this is not because we do it. This is something that I experienced a lot over the years. There are only 2 backdrops I ever worked with that worked to my satisfaction, and that is Lustolite and ClickPro backdrops. And we are the distributor of ClickPro backdrops. So you might wonder like, hey Frank, why do you mention Lustolite? Because it's a competitor. I don't think about competitors or different brands. I always think about what's good for you guys. And you see me using it, so you probably know that's the best choice. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any other brands out there that are also great. Lustolite, for example, is one of the companies that create great backdrops that also don't shine. The problem is they are too small, or you need a panoramic backdrop, and the prints are not as exciting as 980 prints from ClickPro backdrops. The moment you choose other backdrops, and I didn't use Kate, I did something else, I believe from a backdrop outlet many, many years ago. So I ordered those beautiful canvases, muslims, and they were terrible. They had a lot of wrinkles. We tried to spray them with water and then let them hang for about a week, and there were still wrinkles in there. The first time I met Charlie from ClickPro backdrops, I told him the same story you are telling me now about the Kate backdrops. And he said the difference is that you will never get it 100% straight because it's a linen and they print on it. And that means that, and I hope I pronounced this, I explained this correctly. And it makes sense, right? Every single color has a different density. And it means that when you combine that on a vinyl, it's already straight. But when you do it on something like a muslin and you don't paint it, you will always have a little bit of that crinkling effect. And sometimes that's nice, but most of the times with the modern backdrops, it doesn't look right and you don't get it out. So that's actually why they came up with Pro Fabric. Now you saw me using that at the first setup. That was the chintz reclaimed from ClickPro backdrops. And the Pro Fabric is something that mimics those canvas or muslins, and really, really well, by the way. And it's delivered on a pole, so you can use it on any paper system, and it's 100% straight. And that's one of the things that really draw my attention. Like, I love those old canvases, but I want to be able to change it very fast. And we had 2 of those old canvases. They were very expensive, I believe, 1,000 euros. And I just couldn't help myself. I hardly shot with it. I love them. They look great. But if I want to use it, I have to hang them up, spray them wet, wait for at least a week for all the crinkles to be a little bit out, and then when I shoot it, I still have to use Photoshop to get everything out the way that I want it. Or the option is leave it hanging for a month with weights, and then it's nice. I want to be able to change. And that's when we found out about Pro Fabric, and that's everything changed. That's such a beautiful material, and you saw it in our studio. It's totally flush, and you can just roll it up. We have a remote control for it, and you can just roll it up and just get another down, and there's flat as well. So that's awesome. But you get what you pay for, right? They're, I believe, 500 euros for a backdrop, 2.72 meters and 2.72 meters high. So yeah, that's maybe a little bit more expensive than Kate, but you get the experience, right? This works straight away, and with the other ones it doesn't. But that's all I want to say about it. Okay, let me see. Any more questions? No, I don't think so, actually. No, okay, so that was it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. We really appreciate a like and a subscribe, of course, but most of all, tell other people about our channel. It's incredibly important for the algorithm at YouTube that we can grow. Thank you so very much for watching, guys. Stay safe in these very, very weird times. Think about yourself and stay creative. Maybe this is the best time to just lock yourself up in your studio, grab a camera, some action figures or a model, and start shooting some cool stuff with everything.